Hello, everyone. My name is Ethan Rodriguez,
I'm Jana Ramirez.
And this is Mariano Rubio.
and today we're presenting a critique of our assigned research paper, Optimal Design of Nose and Tail of an Autonomous Underwater Vehicle Hull to Reduce Drag Force Using Numerical Simulation. Next slide, please. The authors of our assigned research paper stated the problem of AUVs as a single idea, which is the limited energy storage capacity within an AUV. The approach they took was to optimize the energy consumption by modifying the nose and tail geometries, thereby effectively reducing the drag force. And from our literature survey, we found that increasing propulsion efficiency, hull volume, and endurance are listed as the impetus for optimal AUV design. Therefore, every study focused on finding the best AUV geometry. As a result, we can see that minimizing drag force is a shared objective amongst each paper. Next slide, please. Though a few improvements should be made to the equations and methods in the original paper. First, replacing the traditional Navier-Stokes equations with Rand's equations, as Rand's is better in describing turbulent flow. Now, we'll still use a simple algorithm as well as least squares, cell base, and second order upwind methods to discretize the Rand's equations in ANSYS Fluent. Second, implementing a K-omega SST model to accurately predict the amount of flow separation under adverse pressure gradients should be utilized. And third, coupling the previous 2 points with an optimization procedure using viscous continuous adjoint approach would help in accurately finding a desirable AUV geometry. Next slide, please.
The authors talk quite a bit about the Eyring-Hull equations, and this group of equations is quite common and used in a lot of similar studies on AUV hydrodynamics. And in many of those studies, a visual aid, like the image we see here on the slide, accompanies the equations to help connect them to a physical model of the AUV or submarine, so that the reader can see how terms A, B, C, D, R, and X are used. However, there's no visual aid that accompanies the equations in this study, and that might make it hard to visualize where these terms are coming from and how they're being used. Also, equation 2, which is the one used in the paper, includes a term 100 minus A minus B, and it's not entirely clear where the 100 comes from. This equation can be simplified by replacing 100 minus A minus B with C, the length of the tail, like we see in equation 3, and also if we use two separate x-axes for the nose and the tail domains. Next slide. Another improvement I would make is that the authors state what equations they use for the nose and the tail shapes and how the values in each equation are varied, if at all. However, they don't explain why these numbers are used. There's an infinite number of possible combinations, and I would have liked to see some explanation or justification as to why these numbers were selected for comparison. Next slide.
So the conclusion, was the conclusion logical? There was supporting evidence given by the contours showing the pressure and velocity coefficients, and there were different comparisons made between the nose and tail combinations. And then the final contours that were calculated showed the best combinations of the tail and nose, and so the overall conclusion was deemed logical. The effectiveness of the results presented were very good. They were understandable, and pressure and velocity contours of the different nose and tail geometries were shown for comparison. Pressure distribution plot as well was given, and overall values were used to determine final results were reiterated. So the drag coefficient, lift, drag force, Reynolds number, fluid speed, and the nose tail overall length was reiterated. Though there was room for improvement for the results. For example, there was no numerical values given to numerically compare the configurations. There was no error percentage of the predictions given, and there were no other potential areas for further study mentioned within the analysis. And there was another notable point that though there was a contour given for coefficient of pressure, there was no mention of the importance of having that low pressure in relation to the stagnation point in front of the nose. The lower pressure is indicative of higher velocity and less stagnation. And this would have clarified some of the results given.